Oh, hello. Many Magic the Gathering players ask the question, can the Build Your Own Precon deck tech become a series? Well, the answer to that question is yes, it can, and that series begins right now. Presenting Spell's Trouble, a pre-constructed spell-slinging tokens deck headlined by Dominaria United legend Wrath, Weatherlight Stalwart. Like all of our Build Your Own Precon set series, this deck can be built for less than $45, but if you're willing to spend more than $45, this video will also include an upgrade guide for those wishing to go up to $100. And there are links to this deck in this video's description. So what exactly is this week's Build Your Own Precon, Spell's Trouble, and how does the deck work? Let's take a look. Spell's Trouble is a $44.76 Azurius deck centered around casting spells, generating creature tokens, and drawing cards. The goal of the deck is to, cast spells, generate creature tokens, and draw cards. And once you've amassed a massive board of creature tokens and a grip full of cards in hand, start pumping up your team and attacking for a ton of damage, overwhelming your opponents with your army. The commander for Spell's Trouble is Wrath, Weatherlight Stalwart, a 1/3 legendary human wizard for 1 white and 1 blue mana from Dominaria United. Wrath has 2 abilities. The first is, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control. If you do, draw a card. The second ability is an activated ability that costs 3 generic and 2 white mana. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. Wrath is a commander that asks you to play a lot of instants and sorceries in order to trigger his first ability, but you also need creatures in play, otherwise his ability will trigger and you'll have nothing to tap in order to draw cards. This means you'll need a lot of permanents that generate a lot of tokens, specifically that generate tokens when you cast instants and sorceries. Let's begin by generating tokens. Fortunately, there is no shortage of token generators that trigger off instants and sorceries in Azurius colors. Talrand the Sky Summoner, Murmuring Mystic, Tura Kinurud, Dika Fractal Theorist, Docent of Perfection, and Metallurgic Summonings all create creature tokens of various sizes and traits whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell. Dika and Metallurgic Summonings both have activated abilities on top of their token generation. Dika can give your token unblockable for a turn, which is particularly strong once you've put a few large creatures into play. Metallurgic Summonings, on the other hand, refuels your hand with every instant and sorcery that you've cast already this game. You can also have a handful of permanents that give you tokens for any non-creature spell, not just instants and sorceries. Monastery Mentor and Shark Typhoon are the most expensive cards in the deck, and for good reason. These are both seriously powerful token generators that snowball out of control very quickly. Archmage Emeritus doesn't generate tokens, but it does generate cards. Each time you cast or copy an instant or sorcery with Archmage Emeritus in play, you'll draw a card. If you have Archmage Emeritus in play alongside Wrath, each spell you cast will therefore draw you 2 cards. And hey, I would be remiss if I did not put at least 1 merfolk in this deck. And what a merfolk! Stonybrook Schoolmaster makes a token whenever it taps, such as, for instance, to pay for Wrath's triggered ability. So as you can see, I'm not including Schoolmaster just as a token merfolk, but as a very synergistic card for making tokens. Finally, you've got 2 other token producers. Cemetery Protector is a 3/4 creature with flash that generates humans whenever you play a card of a specific card type, whatever you exile off of its Enter the Battlefield trigger. Generally, the best card to exile with Cemetery Protector will be either an instant or a land. Speaking of lands, Felidar Retreat either makes creatures whenever you play a land, or begins making your whole team bigger with each land drop instead. Now let's talk about casting spells. In order to generate these tokens and in order to trigger Wrath's ability, you'll need to sling some spells. There are 37 total instant and sorceries included in Spell's Trouble. Most of these spells are either interaction, card draw, or token generators in their own right. For interaction, you've got 6 total counter spells, ranging from actual counter spell to access denied, a counter spell that generates Thopter tokens equal to the mana value of the spell you you countered. Spells Trouble also includes a number of targeted removal spells, as well as some board wipes that work well with tokens. For card draw, there are cantrips like Opt and Preordain, which offer some card selection and powerful card draw spells in the form of fact or fiction, Distant Melody, and the Delve siblings Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time. Some spells that create tokens do so in small numbers, such as Raise the Alarm and Rally for the Throne, while others make as many as you can sink mana into, such as White Sun's Zenith. White Sun's Twilight and Martial Coup are in the latter category, but also double as a board wipe for when you're behind. Recruit the Worthy is a great outlet for extra mana you have laying around, as you can continually cast it for its buyback cost whenever you have 4 extra mana. 4 instants in Spells Trouble are particularly good not because of their effects, but because they are effectively free after they resolve. Snap, Frantic Search, Rewind, and Unwind. These spells all untap the lands you spent to cast them, allowing you to cast more spells during the turn cycle you played them than you otherwise would get to. Buffing your team. Once you've built yourself up a board full of tokens and drawn your fill of cards, eventually the game has to end. The best way to finish off your opponent with Spells Trouble is by making your massive army stronger with cards that grow your creatures. Soulblade Jin and Leonin Lightscribe grow your team every time you cast an instant or sorcery spell, while Prava of the Steel Legion, Intangible Virtue, and Inspiring Leader provide a static buff to your army. Then of course there's Raph himself. With how many cards you'll be drawing in this deck, you're sure to have no shortage of land drops to make each turn. Toward the end of the game, you'll find you have plenty of mana sources available. Use that mana to activate Raph's ability and grow your team to kill your opponents in a big swing, or in a couple of big swings across consecutive turns. Much of playing this deck is straightforward and friendly toward newer players, but there are a few tips to keep in mind for getting the most out of your deck. Counterspells are tricky to play with in Commander. In a 1v1 format, you'll often just counter any spell your opponent plays because you'll be able to untap and hold up mana again on their next turn. In Commander, 3 players will get to take turns before you get a chance to untap your mana, so you'll have to use your counter spells more carefully. Only counter an opponent's spell if they are casting something that is very bad for you or the board. If the spell they're casting won't interfere with your plan to draw cards and eventually attack your opponents with a big board of tokens, then let them have it. Spells Trouble also plays some ramp, as all Commander decks must. Unfortunately, most ramp spells available to Azurius decks don't work well with either half of Raph's ability. The best this deck can do for ramp is play a few creatures that tap for mana, since those work both to ramp you and can later be used to tap, to draw cards, or even to get larger when you start activating Raph. Playing the deck. Important advice for Spells Trouble. When Raph is in play alongside 2 token producers, let's say Murmuring Mystic and Talrand, and you cast an instant or sorcery, 3 triggers will go on the stack. 1 for each of Raph, Mystic, and Talrand. Stack those triggers so that Raph's trigger resolves last. That way you will create your Bird token and your Drake token first. Then you can immediately tap those tokens that you just generated to Raph's ability to then draw a card. This will allow you to freely use most, if not all, of your tokens that are already on the battlefield in combat. Getting in for a few extra points of damage here and there, whenever there's a window to do so, will make it easier for you to swing out for lethal on your big pump your team and attack turn. Upgrades. If you're looking to spend a bit more money on Spells Trouble, it would be a good idea to invest in Reliquary Tower and Thought Vessel, as you're going to find yourself discarding to hand size quite a bit with this deck. I'd also recommend picking up a copy of Secure the Wastes and Grand Crescendo, 2 phenomenal instant speed token producers. Generous Gift, Arcane Denial, Ponder, and Consider are all excellent spells for this deck that cost a bit too much to include in the base version, but they are absolutely what you should be upgrading into if your budget hits $100. Brawl, Chief of Compliance, and Haughty Jin discount your instants and sorceries, which effectively means they tap for mana despite not literally tapping for mana. And finally, the big fun finisher of Akroma's Will, while costly, is still the white finisher spell to end all white finisher spells, and is the perfect way to cap off your big climactic turn. To make room for these cards, you should cut Stony Brook Schoolmaster. What? No, what? Jesse, don't cut the merfolk. It's literally a schoolmaster. Oh, all right. Martial Coup, Ravenform, Tura Kinnurid, Avon Windguide, Sram's Expertise, Lazotep Plating, Rally for the Throne, Unwind, Mind Stone, and Recruit the Worthy. I'd also cut a basic Plains to make room for that Reliquary Tower. Spells Trouble is a great deal of fun to play, can actually be competitive against larger scale commander decks, and best of all, costs less than $45. Again, there is a link to this deck list in this video's description, and if you'd like to see more build your own Precon videos, be sure to check out last week's here. But as this series continues, what commander would you like to see a build your own Precon built around? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, my Discord has a completely free-to-play section for those looking to get games of Commander over webcam. I'll link that Discord in this video's description, and you can go on and, all for free, start getting games of webcam Commander, Modern, Pauper, or even Legacy to shuffle up and play at no relation.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
Today, Legacy, but not just any Legacy. We have two extremely talented Legacy players and myself to battle it out. What's your deck?
My deck? You want to know my secrets before the game starts? It's okay.
Yes, I want to know your secrets before the game starts because I have to beat you with Merfolk.
But Professor, no one's playing Merfolk in Legacy anymore.
We just got a new card.
Play an Ancient Tomb. This is another powerful card.
This guy thinks he's playing Commander. I'm gonna kick this spell. And I'm gonna say that Urza's Saga that becomes a basic island.
Shadow Spear.
Ooh. The lifelink's pretty bad. He's at 7. I want to kill him. I'm going to